The morning light came slow and pale across the Afghan plain, spreading in thin ribbons over the cracked highway. Captain Emma Callahan lay motionless inside her hide at the base of a crumbling minaret. The blind was built from broken stone and splintered wood. Every piece arranged to blend with the ruins around her. Dust clung to her uniform, her skin, her gear. She had not moved in hours, and her muscles no longer ached from stillness. The world outside her scope no longer existed. There was only the circle of glass, the crosshairs, and the sound of her own breathing. Her cheek rested against the stock of the Barrett M82A1, the cold metal pressed against her jaw. Through the Leupold Mark IV scope, the horizon shimmered under the early sun. The road ahead curved through open fields where convoys passed daily. Somewhere out there, hidden among the rubble, a sniper had been hunting her people. 6 soldiers dead in 2 weeks. Each kill had been a single shot, placed with surgical precision. That detail told her everything she needed to know. The enemy was patient. He waited for perfection, and that meant she could find him. Emma adjusted her focus, scanning the rooftops and windows that faced Highway 1. The light was shifting now, growing brighter, changing the way every shadow fell. She read the wind through the faint movement of dust and the distant shimmer of heat. A small note in her mind told her it was moving west to east, maybe 3 knots. She adjusted her scope 1 click left, 1 click up. Her heartbeat slowed. She drew a breath, let it half out, and waited. The waiting was what she did best. Far off, the faint rumble of engines began to echo through the valley. The convoy was approaching, heavy armored trucks grinding across the asphalt. She could almost feel the vibration through the ground beneath her chest. The air smelled of dust and heat and metal. The world narrowed to her sightline. Then she saw a brief flash of light from a 4th-floor window, just for an instant. It was the sun hitting glass, the kind of mistake a confident man makes when he believes no one is watching. Emma did not hesitate. She adjusted half a degree, her finger finding the trigger. The Barrett felt alive beneath her hands. Her breath stopped, her mind empty but aware. She squeezed. The recoil hit her shoulder like a kick, the sound rolling through the valley like thunder. A heartbeat later, she saw the window burst outward. The figure inside dropped from view, his rifle clattering against the stone. Then everything went still again. For a long moment, Emma did not move. The convoy rolled on, unaware of how close death had come. Dust drifted across the valley floor, soft and aimless. She worked the bolt, chambered another round, and swept the horizon for movement. Nothing stirred. The world was quiet again, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Inside that silence, something shifted. Her reputation began to take shape. Someone in the unit would tell the story of the sniper who waited in the ruins and never missed. Emma lowered the rifle and exhaled, the air shaking softly from her lungs. The wind carried the sound away, leaving only stillness, patience, precision, and silence. These were her weapons, and they had just written her name into the desert. From that morning forward, they called her the Ghost. The room was too cold, the kind of chill that made desert air outside feel almost human. Captain Emma Callahan sat straight in the chair across from Colonel David Harper, her uniform still marked with Afghan dust. The faint scent of gunpowder lingered on her sleeves. A quiet reminder of the morning's work. Behind Harper, the tactical display cast a pale blue light across the wall. Red dots blinked across the map, marking every confirmed kill she had logged in the past 3 months. From this distance, they looked like a constellation. From his side of the desk, they looked like a pattern. Harper didn't rush his words. He was the kind of officer who let silence do most of the talking. His eyes traced the cluster of dots, moving from one valley to the next. He finally spoke, low and steady, saying that her last engagement had confirmed a new threat. The sniper she killed outside Highway 1 wasn't just another Taliban marksman. Fingerprints pulled from the body matched a name in the international database. Dmitry Volkov, former Russian Spetsnaz, decorated, discharged, now a mercenary. The room seemed to shrink at the sound of it. Emma's face didn't change, but inside, her mind was already moving. Volkov's first shot had missed her by inches. That wasn't chance. He had been trained, maybe even briefed, on how she worked. Her posture remained professional, her hands folded neatly on the table. But the air around her grew heavier. Harper leaned forward, his tone harder now. Intelligence believed Volkov hadn't been acting alone. Satellite intercepts and recovered equipment pointed to a coordinated cell, trained professionals targeting American snipers, not ambushing patrols, hunting specialists, hunting her. The hum of the air conditioning filled the gap between them. On the screen, her red markers lined up along the valleys she had operated in. Harper pointed at them with the end of his pen. The spacing, the angles, even the terrain choices all predictable. Her own precision had turned into a map someone else could read. He told her that the legend of the ghost was spreading, both among her allies and her enemies. To one side, it inspired confidence. To the other, it offered a pattern. Emma felt the shift inside her, quiet but sharp. What had once been pride now bent toward unease. Her discipline, her exactness, the traits that defined her, could be used to trace her movements. She gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledged the truth before accepting it. Harper's voice softened, almost weary. He said that being a legend in a war like this was a double-edged weapon. The enemy was studying her as carefully as she studied them. When the meeting ended, Emma stood and gathered her notebook from the table. She stepped outside into the dry air, blinking against the bright Afghan sun. The base was alive with noise, convoys rolling, rotors turning, soldiers moving in rhythm. Yet for her, everything felt quieter. Legends, she thought, weren't born in glory. They were built in patterns, and patterns could be traced. The Korengal Valley greeted them with silence so deep, it felt like a sound of its own. Captain Emma Callahan moved carefully across the rocks, her boots sinking into dust that had known too many soldiers. Staff Sergeant Ryan Cho followed close behind, scanning their flanks with his M4A1, the AN-PVS-30 night sight, catching faint glints of fading light. The valley was narrow and cruel, cut by rivers of stone and shadow. The air smelled like dirt and metal, a place where time had stopped caring who owned it. Their orders were simple in theory, but nearly impossible in execution. Find the shooters who had been ambushing convoys. End the threat before it struck again. They moved mostly in silence, speaking only through hand signals or a soft murmur over the radio. Every sound carried too far in this terrain. Emma's Barrett, 82A1, weighed heavy on her shoulder, but the weapon felt like an extension of her own discipline. The ridges above them loomed like walls. The enemy could be anywhere, watching through the same kind of glass she used. She trusted Ryan's eyes and instincts as much as her own. At night, they set up observation posts along the slopes, using thermal optics to trace movement between the rocks. Most nights offered nothing but wind and darkness. The first engagement came after 2 days of waiting. They spotted a figure on a ridge, setting up a Dragunov. He worked slow, confident, unaware of what watched him from below. Emma steadied the Barrett, reading wind drift through the grass. Her finger found the trigger and paused. Then the rifle spoke. The sound echoed down the valley, long after the man had fallen. They relocated within the hour, leaving no trace except a few marks in the dirt. It was never about the shot itself. It was about the discipline to take it only once. By the third day, the valley had begun to feel alive, whispering back to them through every gust of air. The second sniper revealed himself near a broken outpost overlooking the road. He fired first, a miss that shattered rock near their hide. Ryan called the range while Emma adjusted. She didn't rush. Patience was her armor. When the wind steadied, she took the shot. The man slumped, the sound swallowed by the valley's echo. They waited 10 minutes before moving. They always waited. The third kill came near dawn. The air was cold enough to bite her lungs. This one was farther, close to 900 meters, almost beyond comfort. The enemy had taken a high perch, thinking height meant safety. Emma accounted for altitude, air density, and the thin wind rolling through the mountain pass. The shot cracked like thunder and ended the illusion. Even the birds scattered from the trees below. She felt nothing, no pride, just the certainty that the road was safer now than it had been yesterday. The last shooter was the most careful. He had watched his comrades die and learned from their mistakes. He changed hides often, left decoys, and shot only once before moving. For 2 days they hunted him, tracking empty shell casings and traces of footprints. When he finally revealed himself, it was because his pride demanded it. He tried to hit the lead truck of a decoy convoy. The moment his barrel flashed, Emma was already locked in. The Barrett roared one last time, and the valley fell silent again. When the mission ended, the sun was low, burning gold across the ridges. Emma and Ryan sat together beside their gear, drinking what was left of their water. The convoy passed safely below, a line of trucks glinting in the distance. Ryan watched her quietly, then said they were calling her the Ghost now. She smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ghosts don't need names. The wind carried the words away, lost in the endless hush of the valley. The air at Bagram airfield carried the familiar blend of jet fuel, dust, and heat. Transport aircraft thundered across the runway, their engines shaking the ground beneath Captain Emma Callahan's boots. Convoys rolled by in long columns, their armored hulls flashing under the afternoon sun. She adjusted the strap on her rifle case and walked toward the operations center, the noise fading behind the heavy doors. Inside, the air was cold and still, the hum of electronics filling the silence. Screens lined the walls, covered in grids of coordinates, casualty reports, and red markers scattered across the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. This was Task Force Phoenix, a new NATO Joint Operations Unit created to deal with one problem: the Precision Strike Collective, a mercenary sniper network responsible for the most efficient killings in the region. Emma stood at the edge of the room, scanning the faces of her new team. Master Sergeant Jack Morrison sat with the posture of a Marine who had lived too long under fire. Staff Sergeant Alicia Chen reviewed data on a tablet, her movements sharp and exact. Technical Sergeant Marcus Reed worked quietly behind a bank of monitors, his hands steady as he tracked satellite feeds. Each of them carried the quiet weight of experience. People who knew how to survive the kind of war that rarely made headlines. Colonel Sarah Martinez stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. She explained the unit's objective with clipped precision. The PSC had been confirmed as an organized network of professionals, not insurgents, ex-Spetsnaz, Serbian sharpshooters, Iraqi commandos, trained, disciplined, paid. Their confirmed hit rate exceeded 90%. They were not random threats. They were a system. Major Kim followed, bringing up maps that glowed red with kill zones and impact data. The markers formed arcs across the valleys where supply convoys had been cut down. The image looked almost surgical. Emma watched in silence, her eyes narrowing as she recognized the signature of planning, of calculation that mirrored her own. When Martinez opened the floor for strategy, Morrison suggested drone surveillance and coordinated air cover. Chen mentioned deploying counter-sniper teams at convoy choke points. Emma listened, then spoke quietly. "Let them hunt me." The room froze. Reed looked up from his screen, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Morrison frowned, muttering that it was suicidal. Chen shifted in her seat, studying Emma as if trying to read what kind of soldier volunteered to walk into a scope. Emma's voice stayed level. "They studied me. They want the ghost. Let them think they can catch her. That's how we find them." The silence that followed was heavier than argument. Martinez didn't dismiss the idea. She studied Emma for a long moment, weighing the risk, then nodded slightly. "Psychological warfare takes courage," she said finally. "Sometimes the best trap is the one the enemy thinks they built themselves." The briefing ended with no applause, no enthusiasm, just the steady hum of machines and the sound of boots moving out into the corridor. Emma lingered for a moment, watching the red lights on the map fade to a dull glow. She understood now that this was a different kind of war. It wasn't fought against chaos, but against precision itself. And, to beat precision, she would have to turn her own legend into bait. The mountains east of Kabul looked carved from steel in the pale light of dawn. Captain Emma Callahan lay in her shooting position on a ledge of shale and grit, her body hidden under a sheet of fabric patterned to match the slope. The air was thin and sharp, the kind that burned the lungs and made every breath feel measured. Below her, the valley floor stretched like a funnel, the only road twisting between walls of rock. It was the perfect ambush point, and she knew Victor Klein had chosen it for that reason. She checked her Kestrel 5700 wind meter, reading the display through the dim morning haze. 3 knots, moving left to right. Temperature 38 degrees. Air density low. Her gloved hand brushed across her laminated dope card, the edges soft from years of use. She memorized the numbers anyway. Distance to target, 640 meters. Downward angle, 7 degrees. Bullet drop, 20 inches. Her Barrett M82A1 rested steady on its bipod, the long barrel aimed toward the ridge opposite her. Every motion was practiced, quiet, controlled. Master Sergeant Jack Morrison lay a few feet away, his binoculars scanning the rocks. His voice came soft through her earpiece, no louder than a breath. 1 contact, upper right quadrant, ridge 3. He's dug in well. The cadence of his words matched the rhythm of their breathing. Emma adjusted her scope. Through the glass, she saw the faint, irregular line of stone that broke too evenly with the terrain. There, a slight depression, just enough to house a prone shooter. Klein had done his work well. His camouflage blended perfectly. The Dragunov's barrel painted to match the rock. Only experience could have revealed that small detail, a fraction of movement, a shimmer where air met glass. She steadied her sightline on the space beside it. Morrison murmured that the convoy was 3 minutes out. She replied with a single word, "Copy." The valley felt suspended in silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At 06:15, the first vehicle appeared, a trail of dust rising behind it. The sound of the engines reached them a moment later, distant but clear. Emma watched through her scope as the line of armored trucks crawled forward. Klein's rifle shifted slightly, the barrel tracking the convoy. He was patient, waiting for the perfect alignment. She could almost feel his focus through the glass. Predator, watching predator. She adjusted her elevation half a click, compensating for wind drift. Morrison whispered a countdown. 5, 4, 3. The instant Klein began to move his trigger hand, she fired. The Barrett exploded with a sound that split the mountain air. The recoil drove into her shoulder, but her body absorbed it cleanly. Through the scope, she watched the .50 caliber round hit. A puff of red mist bloomed against the rock, and Klein's rifle dropped from his grasp, clattering against the stone before vanishing into shadow. His shot never came. The Dragunov stayed silent. For several seconds, The valley echoed with the memory of her shot, then fell completely quiet. Morrison's voice came low in her ear. Target down. No second shooter. She stayed on the scope, scanning the ridge, reading every shadow. Her pulse stayed steady, her breathing even. Only when she was sure it was over did she ease her finger from the trigger. The convoy continued through the pass below, unaware of how close it had come to disaster. The dust rose behind it, veiling the path where Klein had once watched. Emma sat up slowly, locking the safety on her rifle and checking the chamber. The air felt lighter now, though the cold still bit her skin. Morrison gave a nod, half respect, half relief. She didn't answer. Her eyes lingered on the distant ridge, on the silence that followed death. This wasn't victory. It was balance restored. One marksman had waited, and another had outweighted him. She began packing her gear, the echo of the shot still rolling through the mountains like a slow heartbeat fading into nothing. The message arrived at 1945, carried through an encrypted channel used only for high-level communication. Captain Emma Callahan sat alone in her quarters when the alert tone broke the quiet. The message was short, written with deliberate precision. To the American sniper known as the Ghost, coordinates, a time, 3 days from now, and a name that made the air feel heavier, the Reaper. Intelligence confirmed what she already suspected. Alexei Petrov, former Russian naval infantry sniper, a professional with a confirmed record that rivaled the best in history. It wasn't a bluff. It was a challenge. She read the coordinates again. The location was remote. A barren valley, carved into stone, and silence. A sniper's arena. She didn't need to think about her answer. Refusal would mean living under a shadow that never stopped moving. Acceptance meant she would control how this story ended. She began her preparation without ceremony. The Barrett M82A1 was stripped and cleaned on the table. Every piece inspected and wiped with care. The bolt slid back with a soft click. The scope glass was polished clean of dust. She checked every round, running her thumb along each cartridge rim, setting them in neat lines beside her data cards. On her laptop, aerial imagery showed the valley from above, elevations, ridges, potential hides. She studied wind channels marked by shifting sand, memorizing how the terrain could work both for and against her. Petrov would expect a long-range duel. That was his strength. She would not give him that comfort. Her plan was to close to 200 meters using dead ground and ravines. Short range meant less margin for error, but it also meant control. Control was her weapon. At 05:20, the valley was gray with the first hint of dawn. She lay prone behind a low rise, her body pressed against the rock. The air carried the faint metallic scent of dust and cold. Through her scope, she saw him. Petrov moved with the same deliberate calm she recognized in herself. His Dragunov SVD rested against a stack of stones, the barrel fixed toward the approach path. For a long moment, neither moved. The silence stretched thin, vibrating with the weight of awareness. Her first shot came the instant she saw the flick of his scope. The bullet shattered stone inches from his head. Petrov rolled fast, vanishing behind cover. A second later, his return fire hit the ridge where she had been, spraying grit into her face. She shifted, crawling through the dust, her breathing steady and slow. Each movement was deliberate, every decision calculated. Petrov fired again, probing, patient. It was a duel of rhythm now, of waiting for the smallest mistake. Emma circled through the ravine, moving closer with each silent crawl. Her arms ached, her mouth dry from the dust. Through the scope, she caught a glimpse of movement. Petrov leaned forward to reset his rifle. That half-second was all she needed. The Barrett thundered. The round struck clean, dropping him instantly. The echo rolled through the valley, then faded into stillness. She didn't move at first. Her pulse stayed steady, her breath quiet. Through the scope, Petrov's body lay motionless. the Dragunov resting in the dirt beside him. There was no triumph, only acknowledgement. She lowered the rifle and stared at the horizon. He had been her equal, disciplined and exact. The duel was not about winning. It was about proving who could wait longer, who could remain still when everything in them demanded movement. In the end, silence decided. The intelligence room at Task Force Phoenix was filled with the soft hum of machines and the faint scratch of markers against a tactical map. Captain Emma Callahan stood at the edge of the table, eyes fixed on the lines of red ink stretching across the valleys of eastern Afghanistan. The intercepted transmissions were clear now. Hassan al-Baghdadi was the last of the Precision Strike Collective's elite shooters. A ghost who moved through the mountains like smoke. His attacks were clean and deliberate, each one a single shot followed by silence. But there was a pattern. Every strike was drawing a line toward one location, a narrow bridge along Highway 7, the perfect place for one final ambush. Before dawn, the team deployed. The air was thin and cold, the sky still heavy with the last traces of night. Master Sergeant Jack Morrison took position high on the ridge to the west, his spotting scope fixed on the upper slopes. Technical Sergeant Marcus Reed sat behind a screen of rocks, his comms rig glowing faintly as he tracked enemy signals. Emma lay prone on a low rise overlooking the bridge, the Barrett M82A1 steady on its bipod. She checked her Kestrel wind meter, then adjusted her dope card for range and incline. 600 meters, slight crosswind from the north. She ran the math in her head twice, then settled in. At 0640, the convoy rolled into the valley. The sound of diesel engines carried through the thin air, blending with the slow hum of wind. Reed's voice came over the net, calm and clipped. No interference. All signals clean. Morrison followed a second later. Nothing on thermal yet. Emma kept her cheek against the stock, her breathing even. Patience was survival. Then it happened. A flash of light from the northeast ridge. The lead vehicle jolted as a round struck the armor, sending sparks into the air. The shot was clean but off-center, meant to wound confidence, not kill. Baghdadi was testing them. Emma didn't need to think. She already had the coordinates from her last scan. Her crosshairs found the faint outline of rock where the shot had come from. The world narrowed to breath, numbers, and distance. She exhaled and pressed the trigger. The Barrett's report cracked through the valley like thunder. Through her scope, she saw the figure collapse. The rifle beside him fell, clattering against the stone. Morrison confirmed the kill seconds later. No secondary movement. Reed's feed went silent except for the soft hum of static. Across the channel, someone muttered what everyone was already thinking. The ghost is watching. Emma stayed behind her rifle, scanning for any sign of deception. When she was sure the ridge was still, she slowly eased her hand from the trigger and cleared the chamber. The convoy below rolled on, unaware of how close it had come to disaster. By mid-morning, intercepted transmissions from enemy networks dissolved into chaos. The Precision Strike Collective had fractured. Its final marksman had fallen. The silence that followed didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance. Emma watched the bridge below fade in the morning haze. Every calculation, every still moment, had led to this. The real power had never been in the shot. It was in the patience before it. The debrief room at Task Force Phoenix was quiet enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning. Maps that once glowed red with enemy positions now showed only blank grids. Colonel Sarah Martinez stood at the head of the table, her tone steady as she recapped the mission's success. Sniper attacks across the region had dropped by more than 75%. The Precision Strike Collective had fractured, its remaining members scattering into mountains or laying down their rifles. Around the room, the small group of soldiers listened without celebration. It wasn't joy that filled the space, only relief carried in silence. Captain Emma Callahan sat with her hands folded, her uniform still marked with the gray dust of the valley. Martinez looked at her and offered words that were simple, but sincere. She said Emma had saved more lives by waiting than most soldiers did by fighting. Emma nodded once, her voice quiet when she replied that patience was the loudest silence. It was not a moment of pride, but of understanding. The others in the room didn't speak much. Master Sergeant Jack Morrison gave a small nod of respect before turning away. Staff Sergeant Alicia Chen and Technical Sergeant Marcus Reed gathered their gear, their movements slow, deliberate, without ceremony. They all knew that victories like this carried a cost no report could measure. Later, in her quarters, Emma packed her belongings with the same precision she brought to every mission. The room felt smaller than before, stripped bare of maps, notes, and noise. Her Barrett M82A1 lay in its case beside her worn leather notebook, the one filled with calculations and wind calls from years in the field. She ran her hand over its cover before placing it inside. The sunlight cut through the window, tracing lines across the empty wall where missions had once been planned. For a moment, she sat in the quiet, listening to the hum of the bass beyond her door, then closed the case and stood. Hours later, the C-17 Globemaster III lifted from Bagram airfield, engines roaring into the pale sky. Emma sat near the window, watching the mountains fall away into the haze. Her thoughts were steady, her face unreadable. In her mind, she replayed the stillness that always came after a shot, the space between sound and silence where lives continued. Legends, she thought, weren't built from medals or stories. They were written in patience, in the moments no one saw, when restraint became the strongest weapon of all. The clouds swallowed the peaks below, and she let the quiet carry her home. Time has a way of erasing the sound of battle, but not the silence that follows it. The mountains remember every echo, every whisper of wind that carried across a valley before a shot was taken. In the stillness before each mission, there was a weight that no sound could match. It was in the quiet breathing, the steady hands, and the knowledge that one decision could save or take a life. That was where courage lived, not in the noise, but in the calm that came before it. I learned that patience is its own kind of strength. Every calculation, every adjustment, every second spent waiting in the dust meant more than the moment the trigger broke. The silence after a shot was not peace, but balance. It meant that someone would go home because I stayed still long enough, because I chose control over haste. Legends are not born from victory. They are written in restraint, in understanding that precision carries a cost that words can never measure. As the days turned into years, the lines between hunter and protector blurred. What remained was the discipline to act only when needed, and the grace to wait when the world demanded movement. The valleys grow quiet again now. The wind moves through them without fear. Somewhere, another soldier watches through glass, steady and unseen. This story is for them, for those who wait in silence, who protect without praise, and who understand that the truest strength is found in stillness.